I had to take out of church a little bit with the Miss Yolanda Adams, one of the great singers on the planet. Like, there are very few voices. I don't care what type of music you're into that are more powerful and just compelling than Yolanda Adams. Wow. Ooh, man, I had goosebumps in the studio, bro. Y'all don't even know. Let's get back to the show. This is Straight Out of the Cannon with me, Scott Cannon, here on a Friday night. It is 7:35 in the p.m. That means I got to get out of here in less than half an hour, or Dr. Marion Williams comes in with the 2x4 and starts regulating like Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And I don't want that. We do not want that. So let's get to this final segment. We have two very important anniversaries here this week. And I think both of these events are probably two of the most important events in modern American history. 20 years ago, exactly, we got Hurricane Katrina, one of the most devastating storms that the United States of America has ever seen.
This is the scene on Napoleon Avenue, a neighborhood of stately homes flooded to the front door. Choppers above us, our crew drives until we have to walk. The water is getting too deep, and it's getting deeper. We're told there's a hospital about 6 blocks away, and we're going to try to make it there. Each encounter gets more and more profound.
We got people in 3-story houses that's still trying to survive out in the houses.
An airboat offers to take us to the hospital, but it sinks in the maze of tight corners. We dig the boat out, and Stanley Bordelon, a volunteer who has brought 4 of his airboats to New Orleans, offers us a ride. But just as we reach the front door, we meet Terrence and Victoria Tunson, swimming up to their chins, a young married couple who say they need to find their father stranded at home.
Dad, he's trapped in a house.
Slowly, we reach their street, and it's suddenly clear this neighborhood is packed with people who never left. We finally see Victoria's father. He's built a raft out of the back door and uses it to get to our boat. So does the dog, Scoops. As we head back, we learn the hospital has no patients. They've all been airlifted. But there are 1,000 employees and family members inside waving down at us. Across Orleans Parish, 2,500 patients have been evacuated from hospitals. Finally, on dry ground, Victoria and her father are lucky. They'll try to get to family in Houston. But the hard part is all too clear. Missions like this are going to happen again and again and again. Carl Quintanilla, NBC News, New Orleans.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click up.
Yes, as you heard, man, it's been 20 years exactly since Hurricane Katrina. On August 29th, 2005, a Category 3 hurricane with sustained winds of 125 miles per hour at windfall caused catastrophic damage to the Gulf Coast, particularly New Orleans. The most devastating impact actually came, a lot of people don't remember this, but the most devastating impact came not from the storm itself, but from the failure of New Orleans levee systems that was built by the Army Corps of Engineers, which, you know, again, remember, we give these people $1 trillion every year. You know, look at how much money we spend on the military industrial complex, and they couldn't do a better job than they did. The storm surges overwhelmed these levees, leading to flooding in about 80% of New Orleans. Some areas were under 15 feet of water. The breaches, particularly along the 17th Street Canal, in the Industrial Canal and London Avenue Canal, caused prolonged flooding that trapped the residents and destroyed their infrastructure. I remember seeing so much discourse in 2005, and I could only just imagine how much worse it would have even been if we had Twitter in 2005. But so much of the discourse was based on blaming people who did not leave and could not leave. And I remember just thinking, dude, getting up and just leaving, not knowing where you're going, that's a hell of a thing to ask somebody. A lot of these people have nothing. They had nothing already. Have no money, no car. Where you gonna go? How are you gonna sustain yourself when you leave? And there was just so much victim blaming during the storm. I remember when people were, when people were breaking into shops to try to get something to eat. And people were, oh my God, I can't believe people are looting. I remember, I think it was Celine Dion. You would be shocked. But one of the most about that life celebrities during the whole Hurricane Katrina situation was Celine Dion. Celine Dion literally went on the airwaves and blasted all the racist coverage of what was happening. She was like, you guys are yelling about people looting instead of asking why these people have never seen or touched anything nice in their lives that they'd want to loot. Ask why they're hungry and they want to loot in this situation. Like there was so much racial context to this entire thing. And like I said, this is before social media really became a thing. So and it was pretty toxic at the time. I could only imagine how much worse it'd be if it had happened today. Good God, the amount of racist coverage of the Hurricane Katrina situation would be so much worse today. Like, this is one of those things I'm kind of glad happened before social media became a thing, because like, we might have had a legitimate civil war. Because I remember Wolf Blitzer from CNN literally saying these people are so poor and they are so black on the air. I can just imagine what people were just saying behind closed doors. Approximately 1,800 deaths were attributed to the hurricane and its aftermath, with Louisiana reporting the highest toll, around 1,600. Thousands were injured and many people were left homeless or displaced. Over 1 million people evacuated the region, with some never returning. And it's important to state, New Orleans was one of the bedrocks of legacy Black American culture in this country. New Orleans is very unique with its culture, the Creole culture, the sort of French and the African and all these things, these sort of different converging influences created a unique culture, a unique vocabulary, a unique way of living, a unique food palette. And the mismanagement of Hurricane Katrina by George W. Bush's administration, and the lack of strength of the levees created by the Army Corps of Engineers really helped destroy one of America's great cities and destroy one of America's great Black cities. I remember George W. Bush put one of his friends, who named Michael Brown, who was the head of the Arabian Horse, I believe it was the Arabian Horse Federation, as the head of FEMA. And so, yeah, it took the U.S. government a long time, a really, really long time, to get in there to be able to help those people. We saw people drown. We saw the amount of panic. We saw people murdering citizens who were trying to come across the bridge, get away from the flooding. Literally, you had citizens murdering each other, particularly black people, as they were trying to cross the bridge out of New Orleans. I mean, it was really bad. It was really, really bad. And like I said, it was one of those situations that social media could only made worse. And this sort of current media climate that we have, I can only imagine in the sort of post-Trump world how this story would have shaken out even during that time period. Katrina caused an estimated $125 million in damages. $125 million in damages. Making it, I'm sorry, $125 billion. $125 billion with a B in damages, making it one of the costliest natural disasters in American history. Entire communities, especially in New Orleans, the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and areas like St. Bernard Parish, were basically wiped off the map. Homes, businesses, and infrastructure were destroyed or severely damaged. Thousands of residents were stranded. Many of us remember the coverage of what was going on at the Superdome. There was so much panic and misinformation. There was so much hysterical coverage of what was going on at the Superdome and New Orleans convention centers, where those people barely had any food, water, or medical care. There was a lot of talk about people harming children and brutalizing the elderly and all that other stuff, that most of it turned out to be completely false. But the media sure ran with it. This disaster disproportionately affected low-income and minority communities. Tell us something we didn't know. Highlighting issues of inequality and inadequate infrastructure. Absolutely. I told you New Orleans is one of the great cities, one of the great black cities. It was also one of the great unequal cities, where so many of black people lived in poverty, horrific poverty in these communities. Like Celine Dion said, the minute some of these people got an opportunity to see something nice in their life, they grabbed it because they had never touched or seen anything nice in their lives. In the richest, most powerful country in the history of the world. Environmental damage included oil spills, toxic contamination from flooded industrial sites, and destruction of wetlands, which worsened coastal vulnerability. Looting, violence, and breakdowns in public order were reported, though some accounts were found to be exaggerated, like I said. So it's important to remember all those people we lost in the storm, and sort of remember that this storm sort of reorganized America in a lot of ways. This was the Hurricane Katrina is when George W. Bush and the Republicans lost America. I'd make the argument that without Hurricane Katrina, Barack Obama may have never become president. The Republicans became about as popular as chlamydia in 2006 and 2008, and that's why they got blown out. Hurricane Katrina was a big part of that. And we have to remember that there were a lot of communities in places like Houston and Atlanta, and even up here in Chicago and other places, where people from New Orleans were just sort of streaming out all over the country, completely changing these communities that they were coming into. Some of those people never left and never came back, you know, to New Orleans. And so we have to remember this event, Hurricane Katrina, as one of the most important events in American history. It really is. It really, really is. I see it's 7:50. So also, that's not the only thing that happened this week in American history. The event that got the civil rights movement, that lit the match, that inflamed the civil rights movement, 1955. Emmett Till, a 14-year-old boy from Chicago, was brutally lynched in Money, Mississippi on August 28, 1955, during a visit to his relatives. The incident began when Till, who was unfamiliar with strict racial segregation norms of the Jim Crow South, allegedly whistled or made a comment to Carolyn Bryant, a 21-year-old white woman, at her family's grocery store on August 24th. Carolyn's husband, Roy Bryant, and his half-brother, J.W. Milam, learned of the interaction and, enraged by what they had perceived as a violation of racial codes, decided to take action. In the early hours of August 28th, Bryant and Milam, armed with a pistol, abducted Emmett Till from his granduncle Moses Wright's home. They took him to a barn where they beat him savagely, gouged out one of his eyes, and shot him in the head. They then tied a 70-pound cotton gin fan around his neck with barbed wire and dumped his body in the Tallahatchie River. Till's mutilated body was discovered 3 days later on August 31st, weighed down by the fan. Whew, man, that is rough. That is wow. Till's mother, Mamie Till Mobley, insisted on an open casket funeral in Chicago, attended by thousands, to show the world the brutality of the lynching, and graphic images of Till's disfigured body were published in Jet magazine and other black publications, galvanizing the civil rights movement by exposing the visceral reality of racial violence. Bryant and Milam were arrested and tried for this murder in September of 1955 in Sumner, Mississippi, and despite evidence including Moses Wright's courageous testimony identifying the men, an all-white, all-male jury acquitted them after deliberating for just an hour. They deliberated for an hour. The jury claimed that the state failed to prove that the body was Till's, even though forensic evidence and Wright's identification left little doubt. Now here's the real kicker. Protected by double jeopardy laws, Bryant and Milam later admitted to killing in 1956 in a magazine interview. They admitted they killed him after they had been acquitted, for which they were paid $4,000, and they described how they beat and shot Emmett Till for refusing to show remorse. The lynching became a pivotal moment, fueling outrage and activism. It inspired figures like Rosa Parks, who later said she thought of Till during her refusal to give up a bus seat, sparking the Montgomery bus boycott. And here's really the kicker. In 2008, Carolyn Bryant admitted to historian Timothy Tyson that she fabricated her story, including claims that Emmett Till made verbal or physical advances. That young man died for nothing. Absolutely nothing. She lived a long life and died a few years ago after having admitted that she did wrong by that boy. And our government, who still could have done something, could have made her face some form of punishment, decided to do nothing. Milam died in 1981. Bryant died in 1994. The two men who actually did the killing they also face no real accountability for their actions. When we talk about reparations, folks, and people start saying slavery was a long time ago, and that we just need to get over the way we've been treated in this country for the last 400 years. These are the type of stories that I'm thinking about. This was 90 years after slavery had ended. 90 years after slavery ended, white men could abduct a young black boy from his home, well, from his uncle's home, beat him, torture him, murder him, throw him in the river, and absolutely nothing would happen to them. And that's why it's also important to recognize the sacrifices that people in that generation made for our community. I don't agree with some of them about some things, don't get me wrong. There are times I disagree with some of my elders, but it is important to recognize and respect the people who fought for us. And we do need to pay some of the, stall them out on some level, because the type of racial terrorism that people were dealing with in the Jim Crow South is not the type of terrorism I'm dealing with on a daily basis here in Gary, Indiana, or that we're dealing with in Detroit, or in Flint, Michigan, or whatever. For generations in this country, the Ku Klux Klan or some white supremacists could just come and get you out of your bed, murder you, lynch you, hate to say this, rape your wife, your daughter, castrate your son, set your house on fire, burn a cross in your lawn, and they'd all go back to work as cops and politicians the next day like nothing happened. That happened many times in this country, far after slavery. Whole black communities burned to the ground. Tulsa, Atlanta, Elaine, Arkansas, Rosewood, Galveston, Texas, Springfield, 1909, Wilmington, 1898. It is important to recognize that type of racial terrorism happened in this country. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about we need reparations. It ain't just about, oh, we were slaves a long time ago. No. Long after slavery was over, America continued to torment, torture, and terrorize our community. That was never rectified. There was never any repercussions for most of those people. And our community lives with the consequences to this day. Oh man, it's 7:58. Good God. Okay. Whoo, boy. I could have gone on about that for another 30 minutes, but that's neither here nor there, folks. Rest in peace to Emmett Till. Rest in peace to everybody who died in Hurricane Katrina. Chop it up with me on Twitter at The Chemist Lives. The Chemist is spelled with the K, as I am a product of the Gary Community School System. We can talk about politics, music, sports. You can please just tell me how terrible I am at this if you want to. It's all good. I hear it enough. And you can watch clips from this show on my YouTube page, Scott Cannon Radio. You can listen to me every Friday right here, 6 to 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. So for station owner Marion Williams, station manager Natalie Ammons, I am Scott Cannon. This was Issues and Answers on WLTH 1370 AM. God bless the working class. God bless organized labor. As the good Rev always said, God bless you. I'm out, humans. See you next week.